Manx Radio's Countryside is brought to you by NFU Mutual.
Hello and welcome to the first Countryside programme of 2020 with Simon Clark.
And Kirree Kermode. I catch up with Ian Parsons, a well-known farmer from Laxey.
And I catch up with former Manx Birdlife and Manx Bird Atlas man Chris Sharpe to find out what he's been up to in the recent months. Well, Blaine Vino, Happy New Year, Kirree.
And Happy New Year to you too, Simon.
A reasonable Christmas done?
It wasn't too bad. The weather held off nice. I suppose Christmas Day was a very good day, wasn't it?
I don't know. I was in the Czech Republic, so it was disappointing. Not the holiday, but there was no snow.
Oh,
so little
never.
Timmy every day was standing at the door with this little sled and toboggan. And nothing.
Oh, that's so cruel.
But there you go. But I think the last couple of days there was a little bit. I had to come back before then. But I think he's got some in the end, so he'd be a happy bunny. But it's one of them things, isn't it? They're so used to it over there. Life goes on. You know, here, it's just a disaster if it snows, isn't it?
Oh, a complete
Everything stops.
disaster.
They're ready for it. They get out with the shovel, clear the driveway, get in and out and help each other. You know, there's no drama with it.
There's no mither at all, is it? But did you have a goose or a turkey on the Christmas day?
Carp.
Never.
The fish, yeah, with the cold potato salad.
Well, that'll be certainly different from a tea and derby.
Well, I'm used to it now, but it's their tradition, so you know it's just something that I'm used to now. So they celebrate the Christmas course on the 24th evening. They open the presents and things like that. So it's nice because you get two Christmas days, isn't it? But yeah, but it's always a time where a lot of the farmers do celebrate Christmas a lot, don't they? A lot of the families do have that traditional bird and sit down for the Christmas dinner, but in between all that, there's feeding up.
It is
and
indeed.
Stuff and checking
the
the animals.
It's nice though. It's a special time of year, and I suppose Christmas is such a big event in the calendar, not only for family time, but you know, people are getting time off work now, and the Christmas dinner is so important. The people rushing around hoping that the shops stay open, and I think maybe it's gone a little bit over the top, you know, you sort of forget the real reasons for Christmas. But it is nice that people are supporting local around Christmas, and this year was the same again on the Isle of Man. People were down at Bry Rads there on the quay, and out at Knockalo there at the Central Mart's annual Christmas poultry sale, you know, buying their Christmas dinners off local farmers, which is always good, isn't it?
It is indeed. Well, we heard from Tim Johnson on the programme before Christmas, the new president of the Manx National Farmers Union, Kirree, and another prominent man in the world of farming, particularly in the sheep world, is Ian Parsons from Laxey.
Yes, Ian is a very well-known figure in the farming community, very passionate about his farming. He's hill farming and beef and sheep farming there as well in Laxey, and now taking on the role as vice president of the National Farmers Union. Farming is changing in the way it's looking at things, a lot more environmental strategies, you know, Brexit, climate change, carbon offsetting, and Ian is very passionate about all these things, and I caught up with him at Bolgene to have a chat about 2020. A busy year ahead of you, I bet.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. There's going to be a lot of changes going on, I suppose, with the climate change coming forward at the end of January. But yeah, it's a role, I suppose, been looking at for a few years, and learned a lot from Brian and Tim. So Tim stepped up as president, so pulled in behind him, and he'll be a good leader, I'm sure. It'll be
a nice balance as well. Tim, obviously, from the dairy industry, and you, Ian, from the beef and sheep side of things.
Yeah, it covers most sort of bases of agriculture. We've got the red meat industry covered. Tim's from the dairy sector. He's in cereals as well. So it gives quite a broad outlook on Manx farming, I suppose. And I suppose that's the big thing, is the voice for the Manx farmers. Definitely, it's just trying to keep a balancing act and cover all sectors, because it's quite unique in the Isle of Man, the way it's got to be a balanced industry. You know, all sectors are integrated with each other, and they work well together. So it's important that all sectors try and do well.
Well, that is it. And coming up through here, up to Bolgene and Laxey, Ian, it looks like it's been quite a nice winter. Everywhere's green and lush.
It might be green. It's very wet, though.
Well, how has farmers been this winter?
It's been well, I suppose we started with a good spring last year, so that set us off in good stead, and it was a good early part of the summer, though. Certainly since September, it's been quite wet up here and specifically down on the north, so it's been a good growing year, and sort of lambs have done well, but everywhere's gone very wet now.
And I'd find, like you mentioned the lambs there, Ian, Brexit, it was coming there at the end of October. People were trying to get rid of their prime store lambs.
Yes, it's quite funny, like looking back a year ago, Brexit seems to be on the horizon forever. I thought the lamb industry this year would really struggle, but it's turned out to work well. People have sold it early, the price has held up well, and surprisingly, it's the beef job that's taken the biggest impact from Brexit, I would suggest.
And how do you think it will go ahead? We've obviously had the vote in December now. What do you think the farming outlook is going to be this year?
I think for the rest of this year, the lamb trade will hold up. I just hope the beef job doesn't drop anymore. Traditionally, it does tend to drop anyway at the end of January a little bit post-Christmas. It's at a level now where it could do without dropping any further. So just hope that coming towards the 31st of January with Brexit, that we don't get another influx of beef coming into the UK market from Southern Ireland and depress it even more.
And do you think the Manx farmer, he will be strong enough to fight this corner?
We're a pretty strong lot, aren't we? We seem to hang in there. I suppose on a plus note for the Manx farmer at the moment is that even though we're in a depressed beef market, it's a depressed UK market. In the past, it's been just the Isle of Man alone at times when we've had a poor beef price, but it's a little bit more reassuring when it's whole of the UK that it should lift, hopefully. Yeah,
well, that's it. We do live in hope. But as you say, things are changing. Now we're into January. As a farming industry, the tea seems to take a lot of attack from various other areas, carbon emissions, be a vegan, eat more healthy. How does this affect the bigger industry?
It's bound to have an impact, though. I do think farming on the Isle of Man, specifically where sort of the climate is concerned, we're in a very good place, I would suggest. We're sort of fairly low carbon emissions, and we're sort of on a grazed grass situation in the Isle of Man, which sequesters a lot of carbon. So, I would suggest it going forward, the Isle of Man farming industry can be the solution maybe in the carbon crisis rather than a problem.
Yeah, because obviously the island has achieved the UNESCO biosphere status. That is a huge status on its own. It's a huge achievement for what's been going on previously up until this point where it's all become the buzzword.
Yeah, I think we're in a good starting place, but we need to do some work to know where we are. But I think we're a long way ahead of lots of other jurisdictions in how we are with regard to climate and carbon.
And how do you see the methane emissions? The beef industry in particular seems to get a real hiding. We're not doing the right things, the gases, etc. Can Manx farmers do much more to help?
The methane one, people need to read into that a lot more though, because the methane emissions is a very short-lived cycle as compared to carbon. It's totally different proportion in the way it's broke down in the atmosphere, and there's been animals roaming the planet for years, well, forever, and there's probably significantly less animals roaming the planet when there's less buffalo. There used to be horses working on every farm, so that's not a new thing. That type of the methane emissions from animals has been there for mankind, really.
Yeah. But that's so important for farmers to promote what they do and educate and help. I think farmers are very poor at telling their story, to try and educate people what actually goes on in the hills around Laxey and on the shores of the Isle of Man.
Yeah, it's a very traditional practice still over here. We're doing. It's not changed an awful lot in the cycle of the last sort of 100 years. There's probably sort of similar livestock units on the Isle of Man. It's a very much a grazed grass, grazed forage way of farming in the Isle of Man. And, as you pointed on before, that's how we sort of gained the UNESCO biosphere standard.
And do you think the people like Gareth Wynne-Jones and like yourself at NFU, these people, significant people of our industry, can do much more to support the local industries around the UK?
Yeah, local's got to be the sort of topic going forward, isn't it? We need to promote what we do locally, whether it be regions in the UK or the Isle of Man itself. The more we can do locally, the more we can buy locally. and keep it the sort of the traditional way, that's got to be a far greater benefit for climate change, for the environment, than trying to import our food from the other side of the world. There's a far greater, I'm lost there now a sec.
Yeah,
I know. And there's got to be a far greater sort of carbon offset in bringing our food from the other side of the world, cutting down trees in the rainforest. We've got to produce local and try and consume local.
And that's probably one of the things that really gets me as a farmer, as well as just a normal person in the countryside, is the fact that they'll take products from across the world. They don't see the damage that it's doing to their agricultural industries in these other countries because it's not on the doorstep. Is this something where the NFU can actually start showing the general public what is going on in the rest of the world?
Yeah, I'm sure we've got to try and get that message across. I don't see any point in cutting down a tree in the rainforest to produce beef over there for us to consume it in the UK, and us plant a baby tree over here to try and offset the carbon. It'd be far better off, let's just try and keep in the regions where we're consuming the food.
And how do you see the year go ahead for farming? Obviously, it's a pretty miserable day here in Bolgene in January. Can't really see the hills in the background. How do you see the rest of the year going, Ian?
I think, as we said before, the lamb job should hold fairly firm right through. Credit to Isle of Man Creameries. The dairy job seems to be fairly stable in the Isle of Man. Beef job's a little bit concerning at the moment, and there'll be a certain worry amongst the cereal producers. There'll be a lot of autumn crops haven't got planted, and those that have been planted, as long as they've survived this wet weather, and I'm sure there's a few potatoes still in the ground that might be staying there.
And with your NFU hat on, how do you see that going forward as an organisation?
I think it's changing. We probably we'll be involved a fair lot in climate change going forward. The ADS strategy that's sort of been filling it over the last 12 or 18 months, hopefully that's been passed off by Tynwald, so that should be put to bed. It's just the detail in the document going forward now. And I would like to see I can see us evolving into more trying to be a promotional body as well for what we do as an industry, what we produce over here, and work alongside the processors and trying to sort of help promote the products that we produce.
And will you see the new strategy at the end of the month? Will it change the Isle of Man agricultural industry much?
I really don't know what's going to be in the strategy. But as I sort of said before, I see the agricultural industry being a solution to any problem rather than the cause of any problem. And it's going to be changing times ahead, but I do think the Isle of Man is in a good place to start off with.
And with all the buzzwords that we've been hearing lately, Ian, Brexit, climate change, the flooding, the carbon offset, we've got to think of the fellow farmers in Australia at the minute with the bushfires. Is this something that's come off the back of some of these maybe environmental ideas have maybe not worked?
It is worrying when sort of the buzzword has been rewilding. And obviously, with rewilding, certain aspects are fire load, and we saw that several years ago around the Manchester area with fires on the moors there. And for all there has been extreme weather has resulted in the effect in Australia, a certain amount has been down to rewilding as well, and it's horrific when you look at the scenes over there, and it just hope they come through it.
And that's, I suppose, where you come in as the NFU. A balanced view for these strategies that get brought out would obviously hopefully prevent something like this happening.
Yes, obviously, like we don't want sort of an increase of fire load on the landscape in the Isle of Man. So it's keeping fire load down, keeping the place farmed, and it's a balancing act really, and just trying to put the two together.
That was Ian Parsons, the Vice President of the National Farmers Union and local beef and sheep farmer.
Always very knowledgeable, Ian, isn't he? And as you rightly said at the start, very passionate about it, and just wants everything to work in the agricultural world still. He's not a sort of giver-upper, if that's the correct grammar.
Not. No, he's very, very passionate, and a young farmer with it too, and a young family around him. And it's important that they make the right decisions for agriculture to go ahead. And, there's many angles that people are trying to maybe hit out at farming, and there's a blame game and all the rest of it, but we've got to work together to make it work. People need food, and the population isn't getting any smaller, so there's going to have to be a balance. And I'm sure Ian and the National Farmers Union there will give a voice for all farming industries as we go forward into 2020.
You're listening to Countryside here on Manx Radio with Kirree Kermode and myself, Simon Clark. Well, Chris Sharpe was a familiar name in the world of ornithology, and still is as well. He was the director of the Manx Birdlife and worked with the Manx Bird Atlas for many years there at Laxey. I caught up with him at his home to find out what he's been up to since he left his post at the Manx Birdlife.
Finished working for Manx Birdlife really in 2013, and myself and Kay headed up to Sweden for a 12-week break, just volunteering really on a bird observatory in the Baltic, catching birds and monitoring migration movements over an autumn, and fell in love with the place. Went back in 2014 for a longer period of time, mid-July to the end of November. And then 2015 in Madagascar for a month, filming wildlife for a friend. And then the last 3 years we've been in Sweden again, working at the same bird observatory.
Right. Was this mainland Sweden where you were going?
No, it's a tiny little island. It's south of Stockholm. It's the southernmost island in the Stockholm archipelago, a place called Landsort. And it's only 4.5 kilometres long by 600 metres wide.
So a long, narrow one.
A long, narrow one, and it points virtually north-south. So we got to know the island quite well. There's not a lot to before you're walking on it a second time. And it's got a little village there with 18 full-time residents. So a nice little community, a pub in the summer, and a nice little ferry service because it's a very popular tourist attraction for Stockholm residents.
Right. Did you go there because it was a bird observatory or an area of scientific interest for ornithologists? Or?
It was a bird observatory.
Yeah.
It was run entirely by volunteers. So it kind of varied a little bit in how it could run the place, whether there was people there or not. So we were the first full-time staff, if you like, although it was a volunteer job. So we were able to give daily coverage, so you can properly monitor the movements of birds then and get a better feel, like they do on the calf, a daily thing, which is carrying on now with two English guys are up there running the observatory this year, in the same methods as we put in place.
Right. Well, you look at the Isle of Man, you've got the east coast is very rocky, and around the south and the Arble and places. Then you've got the sandy bits of the Ayres and Point of Ayre and Peel. I mean, how does that coastline of this island compare to the Isle of Man? It's
very different. It's a granite island, and when the rocks are dry, there is you've got as much traction as you can hope for. But as soon as there's any moisture on them, they are slippy rocks, which you've got no hope of clinging onto. There's no handhold. When we got there in 2018, April, it was -4 with a wind chill of -10 to 12.
Ooh.
And it was rimmed with ice. The Baltic's not very salty, so even though it is a saltwater environment, it's not a lot of salt in it. So it freezes, and all the wave washing onto the rocks, the cold rocks, it would just freeze, and it formed this lovely rim of ice around the whole island, quite a few feet thick and quite high up the cliffs.
Right, so a real interesting contrast to the Isle of Man then.
Yeah, very.
What about the types of birds then that are there? Is there any similar that are native to the island?
Yeah, very much so. There's a lot of overlap, and it's not inconceivable that some of the birds that we see up in Sweden will end up on the Isle of Man.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah. In fact, we caught a goldcrest, which is Europe's smallest songbird, a couple of years ago. We caught one in the middle of the summer, which had been ringed the previous October on the east coast of England. So this tiny little 5-gram bird had moved out of Scandinavia for the winter, been caught in Britain, and we'd caught it the following summer as it moved back to its breeding grounds, which might have been on our island, might have been going further on.
But what seabirds?
quite a lot of seabirds move past the island. We get Arctic tern breeding on the island, common gull, which are common there, unlike here. Great blackback gulls. Eider breed there, but they're not doing so well. Some concern.
The duck, is it?
Eider duck, yeah, which are doing well here, and were a northern duck, but aren't doing so well in the Baltic just now. There's some problem with the food chain, which they're trying to identify what that cause is. But here they're doing well.
Sweden, and I don't know how many islands are around Sweden in there, but are they very conscious about the preservation of bird life?
I would say generally yes. I'd say generally they've got a good ethic about their nature. There's always exceptions, of course, but generally I think the Scandinavians are very aware of their environment and proud of what it can offer to them in terms of natural history, but also as a social recreation environment.
But if you've been there a few times now, I mean, what keeps attracting you back?
I think the variety of birds, you never know, and it's the same on the calf and any observatory that's studying migration, you never quite know what you're going to catch. And very often it's common birds. We get plenty of robin. We can bring 2,000 robins a year on the island, and they're all going to head into Western Europe, including the British Isles. So you never know what you're going to catch. We catch some birds we've never seen before here, some that don't get this far south. So it's just, you're living next to the sea, and the sea's never the same 2 days running anyway. The little community of 18 people with summer residents coming for, maybe 100 or so people in the summer living. We got to know them all, and you're just treated like part of their community. It's
I was going to say it's a very friendly, close.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah, they're nice people.
What about the trip to Madagascar? What were you doing out there, scratching?
Well, that was scratching. We were scratching and itching. We were helping a friend out. A friend we know who is a wildlife cameraman and filmmaker lives there now. He wasn't living there at the time. He needed a second cameraman for a job he had for a conservation body, and needed a stills camera person. So Kay and I went out. We filmed there for a month in some pretty remote parts of the country. Pretty tough environment to film in. But yeah, fantastic experience.
Did you do much filming out in the Swedish island?
Not so much as I'd have liked, because it was a 7-day-a-week job from an hour before sunrise every day until whenever. So there wasn't a lot of energy for filming. But I did manage to film a cargo boat being shipwrecked, and I made a few quid selling it to the Swedish television company, so that was quite an earner.
Oh, worth it then, wasn't it?
And no one was injured, so that's even better.
That's even better then. Yeah. But, of course, Neil Morris over here in your shoes now. Do you still keep a close eye on what's happening ornithologically on the island?
Well, it's not so much a close eye, but Neil... Neil's a good guy. He's a real thinker about what the future for Manx birdlife and Manx bird conservation is. So I'm happy to help him when he needs it. And I was in seeing him only yesterday for a brew actually and a catch up natter. So he's the charity's in safe hands, and it's going great guns, I think. So I'm not keeping an eye on it as such, but I'm helping out, and I'm quite pleased with what we created all those years ago.
Good. And what's next on the agenda for you? Back out to Sweden?
Well, that's tempting.
Yeah.
The familiar is always tempting, but the two lads who are running it this year have said they're going to run it next year, so we won't be there. But yeah, something will come up. Some new horizon.
Thousands of islands that are unexplored.
Oh yeah, there's always something, isn't it? Yeah.
Chris Sharpe there telling me what he's been up to. Still keeping an eye on the world of bird life from different parts of the world there in them remote areas of northern Europe. So he's enjoying himself and keeping an eye on the different birds. Plus, locally as well. So it's great always to catch up with Chris.
He's a great, knowledgeable person, but isn't it lovely, Simon, that he's done it all of his life and still now, leaving the post, he's still so very interested and keeping that knowledge there for all of us and even the younger generations coming through to look back on and research through. And I remember in Santon Gorge as a young one growing up, all the bird atlas would go down there and be counting the various ones, and at Langness too. So they've always been part of my life, and it's always good to look back on numbers and see how we can improve and keep these things going.
Yeah, nothing wrong with a bit of bird watching, is there? Anyway, we'll leave it there for this week. If you've got anything that you'd like to feature on Countryside, if you can leave a message for Kirree Kermode or myself, Simon Clark, here at Manx Radio, or you can send an email to countryside@manxradio.com. Also, if you've missed parts of the programme or you want to hear it in full, you can download the podcast or listen online to the Listen Again feature on Manx Radio's website, powered by Millie Chaps of Ramsey. But that'll do for this week. We're back next week with more from the countryside. So from me, Simon Clark.
And me, Kirree Kermode.
We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.